Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything.
What's up, guys? Welcome to a new In All Things podcast. I get to host today. We're looking at some changes with the podcast, but first I'm joined with Steve and with Mitch this morning. We've got an awesome topic planned. How you guys doing?
Tired.
Tired?
Yeah, Mondays are hard.
Mondays are hard. Well, you've got Sunday morning church and then Sunday evening
Yep.
so.
Yep, my Sundays are about 6 hours longer than the general staff member, so Mondays are a little bit extra hard.
Yeah.
And then when you add that with a kid, a 1-year-old who's up every hour throughout the night last night, it makes for a really fun morning.
Sleep
Fun wake up.
regressions.
Yeah,
Never
I don't know
fun.
what it is. I would be shocked if I get through the day without a phone call that she's sick. So that's what it felt like. But
Talk to her about disrespect, like not honoring you as a pastor, her dad on a Sunday night. Like,
no, because she's 13 months.
oh, well, that's important.
You could probably broach the topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, not yet. Soon.
Yeah.
Very cool. Steve, how are you doing?
Good. It was a long day, but good. We from church went to a 3 and 4 year old t-ball game of one of my grandsons,
Nice.
which 3-year-olds should not be doing that yet. It was crazy.
Just chaos on the field.
Just chaos. I mean, it's complete chaos. And then we had our small group last night, which was great. And I also got to go to a baseball varsity dinner and give a little 10-minute talk there too. So it was just one thing after the other. No
Yeah.
naps, which
No
was
naps.
fun. No Sunday afternoon naps, which
That's
are
fair.
awesome when they happen. But
I actually almost never take any Sunday afternoon naps. I never have.
really,
I just find that if I do, I won't be able to get to sleep Sunday night. And
I
then
have to keep them short, like
yeah.
20-minute ones sometimes,
Little
just in
power
front
nap.
of the TV with a boring sport on, golf.
golf or
That'll help
tennis
you.
or something.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
How are you this morning?
I'm here. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah.
Sundays are long, but yesterday was great. It was funny. I'm usually like one of the first people of staff out of the building on a Sunday. I'm usually running home to try and help with lunch and Luna and everything. And yesterday I just like had so much energy after service, I think because we ended on an energetic upswing.
Right.
And so I was kind of riding that, coasting that high. And then, when I got home, it all hit. And then we went back to the well to help a little bit with student worship, and that was great. And then, when I got home, I was like, I'm ready to just lay in bed and not do anything. So, but it's a new day, and my child slept through the night, so I'm feeling
Good
good.
for you, man.
My child slept through the night too.
Nice.
Yeah, he's
Cool.
15.
Nick did.
Yeah, it was great.
Sweet. Well, I have a topic for today that I think we can dig into, but we should probably first talk about why I'm hosting today and not so much Mitch.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just that
I got fired.
Demoted
he got
to that
fired.
chair.
No, I mean you've been doing the podcast for 6 seasons, and it's a lot of creative energy. And you need that creative energy elsewhere for the students, and especially coming into summer camp and Strongholds, it's just been a lot. And I've got a little bit of bandwidth and can sometimes be creative. And so I'm taking some of that burden for a little bit and am happy to do it. So, it's just going to be a bit of a different vibe for you, the watcher or listener, depending on how you're consuming the podcast right now.
Right. We're giving you a 6-week trial, and then we'll decide.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, it may be that come season 7, I'm not on the podcast at all anymore. And,
It's just me. I'm like, all right, so we're back on season 7.
No, I'm excited for this. It's good.
it'll be good.
Yeah.
So, topic today is about blessings, which I think plays off nicely from your sermon yesterday, because one of your points was that God does not withhold blessings depending on whether you've sinned or not, right? He doesn't condemn us, and he also doesn't withhold blessings. And I think in the church world, even just as Christians, we love to be blessed, obviously, who doesn't? But oftentimes we talk about, why does it feel like God isn't blessing me, or why are things not going my way? I want to look at it from the other side, which is God is blessing me. How do I best handle this? which is something that I've never heard talked about before, but I think could be interesting because we all have been blessed in some way, shape, or form in our life. God is very good, and he does bless us. But so you get blessed. That's awesome. What do you do now, and how do you share it with maybe friends who aren't being blessed at the moment? How do you tote that balance of wanting to share the exciting things God's doing in your life without feeling like you're bragging or anything like that? Steve, what do you think?
I mean, that's a very relevant topic. I think sometimes we do always focus on, when we talk about these things, on the negative side of this, but the positive side is reality. I would say, I always feel that in my life, like I'm so blessed. I'm, of course, in this room have the most life experience because of age, but we've had hard times. We've had times where it's been tough, where it's been a struggle, where things haven't been, but I always compare myself in that when I feel anything like, well, way more blessed than most people. Sure. So who am I to ever complain about those things? But there are times when I've even felt that, like, I'll just give an example. In our small group, just thinking about it, what's happening when you have a kid who's doing well in something with school or sports, and then there's other people in the circle that the same isn't happening for their kid. And it's not like you're not supposed to talk about it. They're okay with it, but then there's that part of you that pulls back because you don't want to feel like you might be making them feel worse about their situation. And I've been on the other side where my kid hasn't had. I have 4 kids, so I've had where they haven't had the good luck, or the the fortune or the blessing as other kids have, and I know what that feels like. So I've been on both sides of it. So it's hard because I don't know if this is where you're going with it, but you want to celebrate the good things, right?
And you should. I think biblically we see it all over the place of God blessing his people and his people rejoicing outwardly, not just saying a prayer, thanks God, and then keeping it to themselves, right?
Right.
But what does that look like? Mitch, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you had kind of brought up that this was going to be where we took this conversation, I was excited because the same thing that you just said, I don't know if I've seen this done in this way before of but we've all felt it, right? It's a very real reality of having those times of it's pretty hard to deny that God is being good and giving good things to you, but then you're found in those settings of like, I don't know how I'm supposed to conduct myself, right? I don't want to come off like, oh, everything's so awesome right now.
Right.
But like you said, I mean, I think there is a level of celebration that I think is very biblical. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, right? Like there's this, I think in the Christian life that is highs and lows, and it's being able to walk and honor God in both, right? But I mean, I think it's, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think maybe where we're trying to go in this conversation is it's a good perspective to have to compare yourself to some degree to people above you and people below you, right? Because it keeps you just, all right, okay, I know there's always worse and there's always better, right? So I think that's just like, we can just put that on the table as I think that's just a good muscle to develop, to be able to walk into any setting and be like, okay, I shouldn't, think too highly of myself because there's always worse and there's always better, right? So I think that's good. But I think what you're kind of more leaning towards is those times when it's like blessing after blessing after blessing. It's almost just like it's impossible to deny that almost God is doing something different. Is that maybe more the direction we're going?
Yeah, I think the one-off blessings are very easy because you can go, guys, man, God's really he answered this prayer, and everybody kind of goes, praise God, and you kind of move on. And there's, I'm sure, still other prayer requests that you have that maybe God hasn't answered yet, or aren't going the way you would like them to go, or that you see fit. But what happens when you just keep getting a yes after a yes after a yes from God? And how do you? The Bible talks about boasting in the Lord, and right, obviously part of our witnessing to the world is showing what a good God he is. But how do you do that when it feels like it's constant, or at least you're in a season of just like crazy abundance? And how do you do that? I think with the right heart attitude, that you keep it focused on God, but also how do you do that with people who, like you said, it's highs and lows, right? So you're in a crazy high, which all of your friends or some of your friends are in lows. How are you respectful of that? It's tough, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's tough to navigate. I think it's also tough to navigate if you're the person in the low and you're seeing somebody being blessed. I think that's also a piece of this conversation that we need to touch on, which is what is it about the human condition or about us as humans that makes it so difficult to rejoice with others who are rejoicing when it's not going well with you?
Yeah.
Like, I find it so easy to go, praise God, that's amazing, when God's also doing cool stuff in my life. But when I'm getting none of that, it's harder. And why? Why is that hard? It shouldn't be, right? That's what we're called to be. That's kind of what we're created to be from the beginning. Obviously, sin enters in. But what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think, admit it or not, like it or not, there's this sinful flesh that we all carry with us every day that does have this jealousy and this, comparative. I think it's being formed in us through the world and, and the things that we just constantly see all the time and are being told are the measures of success and all these things. And so we're just constantly getting it around us. I've been reading a lot lately about the fact that discipleship isn't just a Christian term, but the actual process is you're being discipled all the time. It's just a matter of who is discipling you. And so you're being formed into something. And I think of this, right? If I'm seeing all these things all the time, especially in formative years, about, okay, I need to keep up with the Joneses, I need to look good, I need to have what they have, I need to do what they do, I need to, or maybe what my parents did, whatever. It creates this type of person in you, this heart in you, even if you call yourself a Christian, where when things happen to other people and aren't happening to you, it's really, really, really easy just in like 0.2 seconds to be like, oh, okay, I'm just ungrateful, or I'm not as good, I'm not this, and you just immediately feel this jealousy creep in. But I think when we kind of let it go unchecked, these feelings of jealousy or comparison or worth, value, where do we get that from? We don't, constantly root ourselves in where those things should come from. Then I think it's only a matter of time before you're sitting in a small group setting, or you hear a story or you read something and you're immediately angry and jealous and
resentful.
Bitter. And it's like, I never could have saw that coming, right? But then I pick up my phone and I see a text and I read something, and that's where my mind goes so quick, because I think that's in us way more than we think. And I think just the longer you kind of feed it and build into it, it just becomes second nature. The second I see something good in somebody else's life, it's really hard to celebrate it.
I think there's also like a bit of maybe a creeping in of scarcity complex, meaning like, oh, well, God bless them, and therefore no blessings for me.
Right.
Which
there's less to go around.
Right. Which of course is like nonsense. God can bless everybody as much as he does or doesn't want. Steve, what do you think?
A jealousy creep was the term I was thinking. It's weird. And I think as pastors, we can have that easily in ministry. Like I'm better than I used to be. I've grown in that. The comparison thing was awful for me when I first planted a church. First was a lead pastor, especially. Even as a student pastor, I would compare other youth groups, and the whole thing with pastoring and leading a church, you want your church to grow. You want to reach as many people as possible. If that's not your passion, I'm not sure. You want to disciple as many people, build the kingdom of God. But you look around, and some churches just are blessed tremendously, and you're like, how is that happening? You're like,
must be nice.
Must be nice. And then, but then I know, and I feel it. I'm on the other side of that too, where there are guys that are struggling and that look at me and look at Sycamore and like, oh man, you guys have it all.
Sure.
Your church is growing. You got a nice building. You got, everything. You got a great staff, which we do. And it's like all those things, and they don't have that. And I'm like, okay, so there's, like Mitch said earlier, we're always somebody better off or worse. And it's not really about that. And it's really, the focus has to be maintaining on how is God blessing me? And it always is. But I think back to where you were going, you were asking that question earlier. It's just, I think being on the end where you feel like you're getting less, if you've had that in your life, it makes you more cognizant of the people around you that are having that, and you want to help them, and so it's this delicate thing, like even like small group sharing things and talking about, like, one example, so blessed with 4 grandchildren, love my grandkids, and it's such a blessing. And yet I know some people that I'm close to who have children, and their kids are like, I don't think we're going to have any kids. And
Sure.
they would desperately love to have
Right.
what we have. And I feel bad about that. Or I try to think, okay, when I'm around them, don't talk about my grandkids.
Right.
And they never said that to me. So I think you can get in our heads a lot about this. And I think that's an important part of this conversation. Like, how do we handle it? How do we not let ourselves get in our heads and overthink it, but then also don't be braggy?
Right.
Where's that?
When I think there's a couple of names that come to mind to me, people that I've met along in my life that are just like the greatest cheerleaders for what God's doing in your life. And I think that is maybe the best example of what we're called to be in these situations. The people that, things aren't going awesome in their life, but you tell them something and instantly they're like, dude, praise God, look at him. He showed up. Isn't that amazing? And there's like no malice at all in it. There's no jealousy. And I think the root of that is just real and true humility, where they go, God will give me what he's going to give me, and I'll be grateful for that. And look at what God's doing in your life. I can praise him for that too. And I think when you meet those people, I've met a few of them, it's so cool to be the recipient of one of those cheerleaders where you're like, wow, like you're just so for whatever God is doing. And it's also weirdly convicting because you're like, why am I not that? Yes. Also, like I think I need to work on that.
I want to be like them.
Right.
And that it's so cool when you can be, when you get to that place where you start thinking about it more. And every once in a while I will, but most of the time I'm convicted by what you're just saying.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I want to be like them.
Right.
Cheer people on and rejoice in as much in their victories as in my own. Right. Yeah.
Oh, you see that in ministry too. I mean, just in our jobs, like there's people who are just so stoked on the church and the ministry doing well. And you're like, that's awesome. And in part, you're like, yeah, I put in a lot of work to it. I'm so glad it's awesome too. But I think they would be equally as stoked if the ministry was doing well and they had zero involvement whatsoever, or I had zero involvement whatsoever, or whatever, right? They just love seeing God work and move. And I don't know why, personally, that's something that I struggle with too, because like I want to have my thumbprint on it. I want to be involved. Right. But like, would I be okay with just seeing God move and having zero involvement at all? Right? Just getting to sit on the sidelines and be like, isn't that cool for everybody involved?
Yeah, there's a pastor that's he was retired, but in his retirement, in our association here in Ohio and Columbus, he would take out pastors to lunch twice, like 2 different pastors a month. And so he would take me out to lunch like twice a year, take me to Longhorn. And he was, had been a great pastor of a great church, but all he did was ask me questions about how it was going with our church, with my family, all this stuff. And he had a little journal. And when we meet 6 months later, he would say, how's your wife doing with their job? Or how's this going? How's this? And it was all about him. Just his job was encourager. Yeah. And man, somebody that can rejoice in the blessings in your life. And he had some hard stuff. He had a son who had committed suicide. He had some difficult things in his family, but yet it was all about, and that, I mean, I know that was his role, but he's really good at it. I'm like, okay, one day when I retire, I want to do that. Yeah. You know, I want to be that person for other people, because it's definitely good. I know this whole talk isn't about, or this conversation isn't about just being an encourager, but that's part of it.
I think it's like most things, it's a learnable skill, and it's something that you can develop if you focus on it. And I think the more you become an encourager, actually, the more blessings you wind up seeing in your life. That maybe before you were like, it's normal life. What are you talking about? I don't know. You have opinions on it?
Yeah, I think more and more, the older I get too, and the more time I spend, in ministry and around the things of God and the Bible and all that stuff, I think the more and more I just realize how much of these kinds of conversations really are heart postures and just mind shifts, right? It's seeing things from a different perspective and then asking God to give you that perspective every day, right? And most of the time it's a really slow process, unfortunately, but it's not going to be hey, you tuned into this podcast and you're going to turn this off, and the rest of your life you're going to encourage every blessing you ever see.
Hey, you're a different person
God's
now.
only going to say yes to you. Like that's not the reality. It's a very slow, grueling thing sometimes in spiritual, life, because we're not going to be perfect and figured out, right? And so I think this is one of those conversations for me, right? Like when you kind of said, "Hey, we're gonna touch on this, we're gonna talk on this." That's where my mind immediately went, was like, it's one of the it's a daily thing, right? If you're hearing this, listening to this, and you're like, "I'm not a good encourager," like, and I am very bitter and very jealous when I hear other people have good things happen.
Sure.
Okay, then maybe that's your sign right now, hearing this conversation, to go, okay, that's gonna be my daily prayer for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna see what I look like 6 months.
I'm gonna work on adjusting that. For sure.
And we talked about this a lot. At our Strongholds retreat with our students, one of the big things we talked about, because we were talking about spiritual disciplines and habits, and what does it look like to buy into these things. And the first step of that process, more often than not, is picturing yourself what you would look like if you were a more encouraging, or if you were more loving, if you were more patient, whatever. It's like, okay, God, can you show me what I would look like in my stage of life, with my personality, with all the things you've given me? What would I look like 6 months from now or a year from now if I practiced being encouraging, or if I was more loving, or more, whatever. And then once you God starts to give you a picture of what that would look like, then you go, okay, God, can you help me every day to just look more like that? Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of like something like this. That's kind of how that starts, right? It's getting a picture of, okay, God, what would it look like if in my family, in my small group, I was the most encouraging person there? And a year from now, what if that's, who I tried to be? All right, what can I do today to pray that prayer, or kind of change my thoughts little by little to get there, right? Yeah. And it's slow, but I think that's kind of what, with a lot of these kind of conversations we have, I think that's what it looks like, I agree.
Yeah, I think so much of the process of sanctification, right, becoming more like Jesus, being made more holy, is we think we'll just stop doing X, Y, and Z, stop sinning, right? Yeah. But so much of it is exactly what you're talking about. It's actually just changing who you are as a person little by little by little, and you can't do it on your own. You need God. Yeah. Anyway, that's a different topic.
That's a fun one, though. It
is a fun one.
I don't want to throw a wrench in it, but I'm just thinking about what I said yesterday about how I use an example of how God's not punishing us when our water heater breaks, or McDonald's doesn't give us our sauces in our bag with our nuggets, or those things.
By the way, Mallory, my wife, was losing it during that. She was like shaking, laughing at the sauce thing. Even I was like, really? But it just tickled her.
Certain things to certain people. Good, but okay, if I said yesterday, that's not God punishing you. That's just life, and it happens. Let me flip it and say this. Do we sometimes, and this, I know maybe this is a dangerous question, do we sometimes say, oh, God bless me in ways, and it's just life happens.
Just life?
Yeah, like, oh, God bless me, the mortgage rates went down and I was able to afford a home.
Right.
Well, they went down for everybody.
Sure.
And they went down because of all these factors, and I'm not saying don't give God credit. Of course I'm not. But I'm saying, are we sometimes like looking for things and calling them out, like, oh, my son's doing really well in school. God's just, well, maybe he studied really hard.
Right.
I'm not trying to,
Can I add a thought? No, go ahead.
Go for it. Go for it.
I think we're opening Pandora's box a little bit, because I think that's a really good conversation.
Yes.
Here's my one thought on it, because I was thinking about this yesterday after the sermon, and then I had something come up at the well during a small group, and I was thinking the same thing. I think when our experience of God is only those moments, when the mortgage rates go down and the things happen, then when that doesn't happen, we either think we're not believing hard enough, God left us, or he never existed. Sure. So I think there's a level of faith you have to come to where God's blessings are just the fact that you're alive, right?
Which
or God's
is
blessings are
the
fact that you can't, there's no level of control you could have in it, right? And it's not just, I'm going to go moment to moment and try to find these little intricate signs that have to point to the fact that God did this for me in this way. Maybe he did, right? But I think more often than not, like, there's a maturity in faith that kind of just comes with, okay, God's just good all the time, and he's constant all the time. And even if mortgage rates stay high, that doesn't mean God's not blessing me. Like, I think it's dangerous to fall into that of, oh man, like,
what isn't a blessing from God, right?
I sit there at my son's baseball game, and sometimes when I'm praying, Lord, help him to have a hit. But I'm like, the kid who's pitching, his parents could be praying for him. Help him strike this kid out.
But who's praying harder?
Who's praying harder? Who's in better place with God right now? And who's God want to answer?
Exactly.
Like, I don't believe. I just really pray for him to do his best. I mean, like, I hope it works out.
For sure.
But I just think we can overplay it. Is that?
I agree. I think you can overplay it. I think you can underplay it. I think, but I don't think those are the times that we're talking about in this conversation. Could kind of bring it back to being in that season where it seems like everything you're praying for, suddenly God says yes to, right?
This is where it started.
This is where it started. I think a good question, and maybe a place that I want to take it, is so he says yes to everything in this fictional season, but we've been there where it's just like, I can't explain it, but we've been praying for it and it happened. And the next thing happened. When do you stop praying? Do you just keep praying you're like, my list is empty. Time to fill up the list again.
I'll give you something.
I was going to say, right?
Since you're hot right now.
But that's a weird balance too, because you go, well, he's saying yes to everything. Part of me goes, strike while the iron's hot. Part of me goes, is that greed? Am I trying to coerce God into... I feel like I found the hack now or something like that, or is it, or we go the other direction where it's like, well, he was going to make all this stuff happen anyway, whether I prayed or not, and so I'll just, whatever God gives me is great, I guess, type of deal. What do you think about that?
It's tricky. That's a tricky one.
It is. It really is.
I mean, it's a conversation really about what you're hinting at is prayer, right? Is prayer effective? I mean, I think there's lots of directions we can go with that.
Obviously.
We got into that in our small group last night because we were in Joshua, and it was when Joshua asked God to make the sun stand still for 24 hours, and it was like a whole extra day of sunlight. Well, we went a lot of tangents there, but when we talked about prayer, and when do we really ask God for audacious things?
Right.
Or most of our prayers are just things that we think are possible for him to answer, but not like that. And then I just randomly said, let's go around the room on the spur of the moment, and what would be an audacious prayer that you could pray? Like crazy. And we had things like cure cancer, end all, childhood molestation and oh man, it's all these things like that. Like, we don't pray for those things because we're like, there's
he could never do that.
No, he couldn't do that. We pray for things we think God could do.
Right.
And that's a whole
help me get this green light on the traffic.
And I know that's kind of goes along with this, but this isn't a whole podcast on prayer, but
it's not. But I think prayer and blessings, not all the time, certainly, but a lot of the times do go hand in hand. And we see, I did the shred right after you did the shred. You inspired me, and so I read the whole Bible in 30 days with some friends and with Mallory, my wife. And one of the things that struck me, even in the Old Testament, was God's ability to change his mind based on people asking him to. Because I was raised a pretty hardcore Southern Baptist, old school, right? And a lot of that mindset is God is going to do what he's going to do, and you better pray that you're in line with what he's going to do, type of deal. And there's a lot of instances in the Bible where that isn't the case, where he says, I'm going to do this, and Moses goes, no, please give me another chance, don't kill them all. And he goes, okay, fine, I'll give another chance, right? So there is a relation. I don't know if there's necessarily a correlation between blessings and prayer, but when do you stop praying for crazy audacious? Like,
why would you stop?
Why would you?
Why would you stop praying for blessings?
Fair. So you don't.
I don't know why you would.
What if you run out of stuff to pray for?
When does that happen? Everything is so perfect.
I
don't know. That's a great question.
Look, man, the reason why I want to talk about this is because this is the season that Mallory and I have been in for the past 6 months, where, really since we started working, since we moved here and started at Sycamore, which is, I had like 5 items on a list, and they were not insignificant. They were stuff like get us fully out of debt, student loan, car, everything, which is a big, that's like a big milestone in anybody's life. Stuff like the housing market, it's insane right now, but we believe that you can provide us a house at a price that we can afford, and it's going to be the house that, you know, we could never even have hoped for. It's so good. So please make that happen. Mallory needs a job where we don't have to worry about childcare. I don't know how you're going to make that happen, but we're going to pray for it. And it was just like one by one, he just keeps taking these like audacious prayers. You know, we believe he can do anything, and so we're praying for it. But then you look around and you're like, yeah, this market's insane. Like, I don't know how anybody affords anything here. And then all of a sudden he just makes a miracle happen. He's like, no, here you go. And this is what you can do now, and go do it. So the question for me is like, well, if I then come up with, he knocked these 5 things off of the big list, do I just find new things to add to the list? Or do I sit back and I go, praise God, that's awesome. We're good. Thank you.
Go bless somebody else for a while.
Well, I mean, I'm sure he's blessing other people.
Because like you said earlier, there's no limit. Like,
true.
Right? So
yeah, I guess, why would you stop?
I don't know.
I mean, I think it's more of a question of what's your response if he stops.
Right.
Right.
Which
like,
at this point is like, he doesn't have to bless us at all. Like,
right.
He's done such amazing things.
Right.
Like, so it's cool.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's more of the approach to it is like, okay, God does show up, and you have this season of yes after yes after yes. Like, I know that we've been there too, right? Like, we're not there right now, but we've been there. Like, where it's those times of just like, there's no explanation for this. Yeah. Like, it's somebody does this and then this moves here, and you're just like, God, like why are you doing this, right?
Yeah. And thank you. But, but this is why. Yeah.
Like me and my wife Lexi's response is always like we almost feel guilty. Like, it's almost like, okay, we just got to give, like, we got to buy more people stuff than we ever have.
Can we
like,
tithe more?
Let's give this away. Like, that's what we always kind of naturally respond to. But I think that question though is valid of like, you know, when God keeps saying yes, and then you're kind of like, okay, God, you've done it all. Right? I'm going to keep asking. I think that's like when you have a right view of God, he's a good father who wants to give good gifts, right? Jesus talks about that, about the fact that, you know, if your kid asks for bread, you don't give him a snake, right?
Right.
And he's like, and you're a wicked person, you're broken, you're sinful. So if the perfect God who is good can give even better things, why not ask, right? That's his whole teaching on prayer. And so I think, you know, never stop asking.
Yeah.
But I think it's this mindset of God might not answer the way I want or the way I hope or the way he used to. And that's okay too. Yeah. Right. I keep thinking of this couple verses in Proverbs 11. I had read it recently, and then I just feel like it just keeps showing up. But Proverbs 11:24 through 26. One person gives freely and yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly but comes to poverty. And then 25 is the one that's been sticking with me. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will themselves be refreshed. 26. People curse the one who holds grain, but they pray God's blessings on the one who is willing to sell. And especially that verse 25 of just, I think, and you know, the book of Proverbs, not promises. It's not promises from God. It's not always going to happen the way that he wrote them down, but they are good things to live by. And just that, and there's a lot about generosity and blessings and how to kind of put yourself in a position where those things might happen more often to you.
Sure.
And one of the, you know, ways that Solomon sets that up is refresh others and you yourselves will be refreshed, which is a really cool, it's very countercultural, right? Where if I'm going to give first and put myself in that position, not only am I going to be refreshed, but it says that because I live that way, people will pray God's blessings on my life, right? We can pray for blessings. 100%. But what about the whole other element of the fact that if you live as a refresher and an encourager, a really, really good, what'd you say, cheerleader of other people, other people could start to pray God's blessings on your life. And that's really powerful too, right? So I just love the way he sets that up in Proverbs 11. And that's just where my mind was going in this conversation.
For sure. Yeah, Steve.
I thought that was excellent, those passages. No, I was thinking about it too. I've been there, like you guys both said. I've been there, but I've also more when I was your age, been there, and then in my early 30s planted a church, and it was like amazing how God blessed. Like answer. You know, you pray so much when you're in that stage of everything, and then had a little bit of a period where everything kind of tanked, and I was like, okay, God, what are you doing? Am I supposed to be here? What is happening? And it was like, I didn't feel the blessings, and other things happened. Just a whole myriad of things. And then, you know, things turned around, and then things got better again but I never, in that period of time said, well, God doesn't love me now, or God.
No, of course
because
not.
I look around and be like, well, other people are struggling too in life. It's
Right.
just now it's my turn to struggle.
Okay.
And it's not like that bad.
Right.
Like we said earlier, the comparison game is a very dangerous thing to do, but it's also,
It can be helpful.
it can be helpful. It can be healthy at times. Be like, and sometimes I want to say that to people, like, stop, shut up, look at you,
Dude.
look at your life. Are you kidding me? You're complaining.
Go to a different country.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of it's relative.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer you've gone through things, the more you've realized, like, okay, there's ups and downs in life.
Right.
And I'm so happy for you, and I rejoice with you.
Hey, thanks, man.
And I'm going to be there if things change.
Appreciate it.
And
Yeah.
I'll mourn and cry with you too, because it's like I hope not. I mean, there's nowhere does it says it's going to have to. Things
Right.
are going to just be ready. Things are going really good. It's going to get bad.
Right, yeah.
Don't you love people like that?
Yeah.
When you start to share.
Oh, well,
well, just wait. Something bad's
Enjoy it now while you can.
this is a sign.
Yeah.
Something bad's coming. Doesn't have to be.
No.
It just doesn't. I mean, and it's so much of its perspective in life.
I
yeah.
agree, but I think that's a really good point from those passages, which is, in the season that we're in, if my list has run dry, I should pray for other people's blessings, right? I should be wishing God's blessings on those who sell, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, while you're at it, last night my audacious prayer, and I said, maybe this sounds selfish in my group. I said, but my audacious prayer is that somebody walks into our church and pays off our debt.
Yeah, pays off the
By the way,
mortgage.
it's $3 million or so. So
Yeah.
but because it would free us up to spend more money on outreach, on missions, on reaching more people,
sure.
staffing, all the things that we could do
Yeah.
with that. And the mortgage rates has gone up, so it's a lot of money every month we're spending on a mortgage. I'm like, man, and there's people with $3 million that could do that. That's
For sure.
audacious, though.
Oh, it's huge.
But it's possible. God could do
100%.
that. So I'm like,
100%.
so add that to your list.
I'll start praying for
Please.
that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
happy
you.
to. No, I think that's probably a good place to land the conversation, which is if
With
you're
our giving on our website for giving on the bottom
my
of the screen. I'm
gosh.
just kidding. I'm joking.
scan the QR code when you
Yeah.
come in on Sunday morning. No, which is just because that kind of answers the question: is I've been blessed. Now what? Well, pray for other people's blessings too, and pray that God keeps blessing you.
Yeah.
Right.
God's a good God, and rejoice with others. Rejoice because He's blessing you, and pray that you have more and more reasons to rejoice. And if you don't, that doesn't change very much about who God is.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, guys. I'm glad that you guys joined me. I'm glad that you guys chose to tune in, either audio only or online with video on YouTube. Drop some comments down below on maybe things that you are praying for. We'd love to pray with you, or share stories in which God has blessed you. We'd love to rejoice with you. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. Click the like button. It helps us with the algorithm, and it shares it with more people. Share this with somebody that you might think needs to hear this conversation, and we'll see you in the next In All Things podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.